So would you tell me about your history with Emmy and a little bit about you and how this all came to be?
So I went to Zimbabwe in 1995 and picked up some infection, some virus. I then came back. Within about a month, I was experiencing sickness problems, gastroenteritis problems, and started getting weaker and weaker. So I came back in the August. By this October, I was getting weaker. And by the Christmas, I really was struggling to walk. At that point, I'd been to the doctors a number of times, and I ended up in hospital. We suspected rheumatoid arthritis because of some blood tests that sort of indicated that. I was in there for a month, having a number of tests, and at the end of that stay, a doctor came in to speak to me and said that she realised I was making this illness up. I was probably doing it for attention, probably unhappy at school, she said. She was going to give me 2 weeks off and then I need to go back to school. So I tried multiple times with school. I was getting weaker and weaker. I was crawling at a lot of points, sleeping on the floor in school, being called, my mom being called to say, please come pick this child up. There was a number of interventions from my school priest saying, this is being made up, you need to start taking responsibility for your life. Some teachers sort of saying, she loves school, she's not putting this on. I've recently got my doctor's notes from the whole of my history. Phrases like hysterical gait, like hysterical walking was mentioned. Then the first point came, well, in hospital I was given physio. I was told it was to strengthen my muscles in the pool. This made me weaker and weaker. I remember trying to get out the pool, them not helping me, saying, you've got to do it, you've got to get out. I remember lying on the side of the pool. I remember one very distressing time when my period had started and I'd got out the pool, I couldn't get to the toilet and I was just bleeding everywhere. Being told, you know, you've just got to get to the toilet, you can do it. But, you know, after all that period, school chucked me out, saying I was being disruptive. Ended up at home, having some home tutoring, small amount. And I was then sent to a physiotherapist again. To be honest with you, at that point, I was told that this would make me better, and I was very positive about it. So it was a mixture of sort of cycling, sort of exercise bike, the physio doing sort of exercises to sort of try and stretch my muscles out. My muscles were very tight. And I was doing that sort of 3 times a week. But that only lasted for 3 weeks because I got weaker and weaker to the point where I was having to use a wheelchair to get in and out of the physio. And actually having been lifted off the bike to get into the wheelchair. And the physio wrote to my doctor and said, this is not helping her. This is making her worse. We have to stop this. So that was only lasted 3 weeks. I was very blessed at that point because I think they were planning a much longer duration. And it was the physio who stopped it. I was then bedridden for a period of time. I mean, not completely bedridden. I could just about crawl to the toilet. I couldn't manage light, noise, struggled to eat. Just general chewing was. After a period of bed rest, things started to improve. This was around sort of 97, where ME in the UK really wasn't being treated, in the sense that the physio was sort of psychological, she needs to rehabilitate. But then in about 2000, ME clinics started opening up. And I met an occupational therapist at that point who had trained in cognitive behavioural therapy and graded exercise. And so that in 2000, that was my first meeting with a graded exercise and cognitive behavioural therapist. Was I dubious at that point? Possibly a little, especially with my experience with the physio. But tried that. I think like many ME people, we are triers. And so the idea was to list the activities I was doing. So by that point, I was doing a little bit of study at home. So I was doing 20-minute blocks. I had to list that. And I was walking downstairs once a day to have a meal. So I was having one meal downstairs. I was having a tutor for sort of 30 minutes a day in my room. And the idea was to find your base point, the point that causes no exertion, no increase in exhaustion. Find that point, and then the idea is to increase it every week by an amount. It was normally about 5 minutes. Then I was doing that. It wasn't helping, but it wasn't making me a lot worse because I was only sort of increasing quite mild activities, like say, I would try and do my study for another 5 minutes. Then she started increasing, she wanted me to walk around the garden. I mean, I really couldn't walk around, I couldn't get down the house, downstairs, down the house. So that was a real challenge, but again, I was determined and I thought, right, no, I'll try it. And then every week, I think I had to increase, I had to do another route around, and it just got worse and worse. I then, did I stop going or? Well, I think I was allowed so many sessions. I was meant to get to a certain point. I think I was realizing that it was making me a lot iller. So I was reducing what I was doing. And that sort of ended. I did learn sort of pacing skills a bit more with her, which was good.
Can you explain what do you mean by pacing? And yes, maybe examples.
Well, I sort of was doing it before, but she was very much sort of talking about doing an activity and then having a rest after it, sort of setting up a day plan of how to run your day. So doing an activity, having bed rest, doing another activity, having more rest. And I found that helped, sort of having a sort of a plan in place of enforcing rests in some respects. I think sometimes making sure that you do an amount that's manageable and then adding a rest on, rather than getting engrossed into something, think, oh, I'll just do another 10 minutes, then realizing you're so tired, you know, that sort of, so plan, I found that very useful. And she, I would say, increased my knowledge of that. Yeah, definitely. And then that stopped. Then in about 2008, actually exactly 2008 in September, I went to see an ME consultant. This was new. We never had ME consultants before. He interviewed me And actually, I have my letter here that he wrote to my general practitioner to report back on the interview. And one of the phrases was, I suspect that she has somewhat adverse form of illness behaviour. And that's what he was diagnosing me then. He felt that, and of course, I'd been ill then for quite a while then, sort of 95 to 98. He was really stating that there was very, very little that could be done because it was very reinforced. That by this point, I really did believe I was ill. He believed. And that I was still making it up, but it was very reinforced and I believed it true heartily. In his opinion, may I add, this is his opinion. I'm not stating this as a fact. And he decided that he didn't want to continue with me, which I think was a positive. But I went back to this occupational therapist who I saw in 2000. She was part of this clinic again. And she was doing very much of the same thing, but she'd let go of the graded exercise a little bit. She was less enforcing that. She'd obviously found that it wasn't successful. And she was a bright woman. She was a kind woman. I wouldn't say she'd let it go completely, but she'd definitely let that go. And she was doing more meditation. So when you were resting, you were doing meditation. I mean, this was quite strict. This was getting to the point that every half an hour I had to do 10 minutes meditation. Every half an hour. So if I was at a party, I was disappearing to meditate for 10 minutes. I have still carried on that meditation, and I used to do it before her, but I still carry that on about sort of 2-3 times a day. I find it a good form of rest. But I did stop doing it after every half an hour because it became really restrictive. I was I'd be going out for a meal and I'd be going into toilets, meditating, So, it just became quite restrictive. So that's my experience of the National Health Service in the UK surrounding treatment. All the other treatments I looked into were private. But what is interesting, a point that's maybe not relevant, but in 2008, when I went to see this ME consultant, he is originally an infectious disease consultant. And last year, an infectious disease consultant or an immunologist found that I had a parasite that I'd picked up in Zimbabwe that hadn't been treated and wasn't picked up by anybody. And what is interesting, at the start of my illness, as a young female 15-year-old, even though I'd just come back from Zimbabwe and had requested on numerous occasions to have tests for infectious diseases from Africa, I was not tested. I've only just recently found out this. And I found a letter from my general practitioner who said, we don't need to test her for infectious diseases from Africa because she had all the immunizations. She won't catch anything else. And then it very much went on to hysteria, chronic fatigue syndrome. So no tests were really done except the rheumatoid arthritis at that point. And I was very quickly put into the group of hysteria. I mean, that's how they saw chronic fatigue syndrome, a sort of hysterical illness where you're creating it for an effect.
Was that the only explanation they gave you, or were there other, did they try to explain to you what is happening, or something about like anxiety and how you should, or anything of that sort?
No, and to be honest with you, they never mentioned hysteria. They never mentioned chronic fatigue until about a year or two later. But it's written in my notes within 5 months of my illness starting, which is a little early before any other tests were done. To be honest with you, I was a happy child before my illness. I loved school. As teachers were reporting, I've got teachers' letters within my doctor's notes sort of saying, we don't understand why you think she's trying to get out of school, because she loves coming to school. She enjoys it. She wants to be here. We've never seen any signs of anything other than that. So there was that side, and then suddenly there was the other side, very quickly made up, that I was creating an illness to get out of school, to create attention. And that was, I had many friends, I had a reasonable relationship with my family. I don't think attention was something I was craving at that point. I just find it amazing how as a female, I know I keep going back to female, but as a 15-year-old teenager, I was very much, oh, this is what it is. No psychiatrist intervention at all. No psychiatrist assessments. This was all led by a general practitioner and a rheumatoid arthritis specialist. That was their perception of it.
If you could estimate on a scale of maybe like if your health was 100% before you got ill, then how bad was it just before the physio, and what was it after? Like, was it 30%, 60%?
Yeah, so I think time has been a problem. I mean, this is 1995 we're talking, but I have spoke to my mum about it, thinking she might have some more recall. I mean, I remember, my mum remembers me being able to walk to the physio at the start. So that was a distance of about 100 metres from the car to the physio. Within a week and a half, I was having to use a wheelchair to get out of the physio. And then 3 weeks, I was then having to use a wheelchair to move about outside. So if I'm looking at my mobility, I was walking slowly at the start. There's no doubt about this. I was walking very slowly and sort of, finding it very heavy to walk. But, the symptoms of dizziness and just sheer weakness were so much that I had to use a wheelchair. And I didn't want to use a wheelchair. So it wasn't like, oh, let's have a wheelchair. I was desperate not to go into a wheelchair. This was being forced upon me. So I would say about 50, 60% of my health, because I was then ending up in bed as well at home. I wasn't just returning to home and able to carry on the activities I was at home. I was losing my speech. I was not able to cope with the dark. So I'd say 50, 60% of my health. But it's difficult to judge, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Okay. How long did it last? I thought you said, like, this particular physio, do you remember how long you had a long bed rest, you said?
So to get back, well, I've never been able to walk 100 meters again. Wow. But to get back to where I was before the physio to a reasonable amount took about easily a year, but probably 2 years to get back to that point. So the first year was definitely full bed rest, I was able to do some activities like maybe sit at my computer for 5-10 minutes, but I couldn't read. I was the dark, all that. After a year, things started to slowly improve. I changed my diet, that helped. But yeah, it took, I mean, I think I would say 1 to 2 years, and that I would personally say that was quite a long time. And I never have recovered. I don't know, have I ever really recovered back to that full point before the physio? But I was pretty ill before the physio, but I was pushing myself before the physio. Before the physio, I was dragging myself to school because I was determined to get that. I remember getting dressed, determined to go to school, and I was so exhausted. I was having to crawl into the car, and I was absolutely determined. So my point was, I was doing probably too much exercise, in my opinion, before the physio.
So where are you now after all these years? What's your physical activity levels and condition?
So I would say things improved to a point. So after the physio, say, about 4 years later, I got to sort of a plateau. And I've tried many things since then.
Can you tell what has been helpful? Which things you changed your diet? You said that helped.
Yeah. So I was losing a lot of weight, and I was finding certain foods more exhausting to eat and caused me more sort of digestive problems, diarrhea, sickness, nausea. So I cut out. Well, actually, my GP, who diagnosed me with chronic fatigue and hysteria, I think started taking a little bit more seriously and put me on like a powdered supplement that I had for about a year, and then started introducing foods to see what caused more exhaustion, because I really was spending a huge amount of time in the toilet per day. They were I wouldn't say my favourite room, but my most frequented room. So that helped. Pacing definitely helped. There's no doubt about that. That helped. And so those two combinations. One thing that definitely doesn't help is I have a desire to do things. That isn't a problem. I want to do lots of things. If I can easily write a list of things that I want to do and desire to do. And if I did all those, I'd become very ill. The pacing controls that desire and helps you manage your illness. That's how I see it. And helps you listen to your body a bit more. So to get to this plateau, I think that's helped. One thing that hasn't helped, and I think still causes problems today, is my desire is there. My desire to say, go out for a walk with my son. Oh, he wants to go and play Pokemon Go. Oh, I'd love to go out with him, etc. Oh no, I've probably done enough activity today. So my pacing stops it. But with all the different types of medical intervention, they've been very much based on ignore how your body is feeling. And actually, I think it's even still there. Your illness is in your head. You are creating it. You can do this. And so I have the desire, that's one pull. I have the other pull of, if I only just did more, I'd be able to do more. And then I have the other side, the effects of doing that activity, the exhaustion, the lying in bed thinking, I can't really move now, I'm so tired. So I would say that is one of my problems that's been created by this. The shame of having this illness, of having an illness where a lot of people, a lot of society think that I've created it and that if I changed my behaviour, I could make myself better. The desire the desire to do more, to be more part of society and life and family life, and do things that I desire to do. I think that is, for me at this point in time, I'm noticing that as more of a challenge. And I think probably as I'm just learning who I am more, as I'm, yeah. But yeah,
So,
pacing, diet, and trying to listen to my body, but that is where my struggle is still.
and you are still using a wheelchair everywhere you go, right? And
so I can walk short distances around the house, especially with like furniture support, and I have tall chairs in different rooms. But I'm using a wheelchair to get around outside. I can only really go out once to twice a week. Depends how I'm feeling. Like today, this week is a once a week. If I'm lucky, I probably won't go out at all, because I've probably overdone it slightly the weeks before. And going out is a sort of being driven somewhere, maybe a 2-hour from door, from going out to coming back. So we're not talking big adventures. I'm having an assistant for about 110 hours a month. So he's doing a lot of my housework, cleaning, cooking, well, all of my cleaning and cooking, and helping with my children. My main use of energy is being present with my children as much as I can be. I'm able to I'm trying to learn Swedish, which is a slow process with my memory loss and sort of the brain fog, but I'm managing to do about 20 to 30 minutes a day of that if I break it up into 2, if I have time and energy. So I'm very lucky to be where I am, and I think one of those, in my opinion, one of those blessed situations is the physio stopping the treatment, because it was reasonably, that was probably the most concentrated form of exercise that they were planning for me. All the others have been a little bit more just guided. You do this at home, you do that. This was me going into a physio department and doing exercise monitored by a health professional. And I do think my blessing is that it wasn't continued for longer, because I think it would have taken me even longer to get back to any sort of form of movement from my bed, and I just don't know where I'd have been. I have no idea.
do you have a theory of what your illness is and how does it feel?
The theory, you read a number of information. I know that I have a desire to do activities. So I have the desire to go out. I don't have a fear of it. So I want to go out and do it. If I do something, whatever activity it is, a Swedish or whatever, I know that will cause me a certain level of tiredness. I know that if I go over my limits, if I do too much, the next day I can't do it. I just haven't got the brain power or the energy to sit up or whatever. So I sort of feel there is something in my body where my energy resources, the battery is a great example. I have so much. If I use a small amount, it's able to replenish. If I use too much, it's not able to replenish. I use oxygen because I have sort of different blood sort of issues, and that could be related to lack of oxygen around the blood. I use adrenaline, and that helps. I use LDN, and my medical training is not good enough to know how that helps, but I think it does. But no, I mean, I think if I had, say, been diagnosed with the infection I got, if they tested me for African-related infections and viruses, and they'd found what I'd got, and I'd been treated, and then I'd been told to rest and recover, I don't think I'd be in this situation now. That's my belief. I had a friend actually at school, and she got glandular fever about the same time I became ill. And she was diagnosed with glandular fever. She had about 2 years off school, slowly coming back if she felt that things were improving. She was told to rest. She was told to wait till she felt she had enough energy. And she recovered after about 2 years. The difference between me and her was we both got something at the start, but I was told not to rest, not to listen to my body, and not to see what I have as an illness. And she was taught to rest, to recognise the symptoms she was having, and to wait until she felt strong enough.
Do you know if the situation in the UK is any better now, and how have you been treated in Finland by doctors?
Me and my husband talk about going back to the UK because of my illness and how I'm being treated in Finland. I'll talk about how I've been treated in Finland first. If I go to a doctor, and I have some doctors who are slightly more sympathetic and have some more faith in me than others, but normally the response is, oh, you have no symptoms, you have an illness, you don't have any symptoms. So if I ask for some treatment, oh, you have no symptoms. If I go with another illness, like, for example, endometriosis, which they've found, or cystitis, their approach is, oh, we're not going to look at that, you're fine, come back in a month's time. And that's how I'm treated. I tend to go privately. I find going to doctors very stressful, because whatever I say tends to be dismissed. I unfortunately now take my husband because I tend to listen to him more, which is a sad reality because I'm a bright woman. I should be able to say what I think what symptoms I have, and I should have to have some level of belief. But that doesn't happen. I'm lucky that I'm being left alone, really, by the medical profession, unless if I go in to see them, there's disbelief, but there's no intervention. And I'm lucky to have a psychiatrist who says there's no psychiatric illness, because that's helpful. I saw Olli Polo, an ME doctor in Finland who used to work in Finland but is now not allowed to. So I'm still using some of his treatments, so I'm struggling to get the medication because doctors don't want to write it. And I'm allowed assistance and care. That's been fabulous. So the big problem with Finland for me, and I know for other people it's different, but for me, it is perception. It is me going into a healthcare situation or to friends in Finland and them seeing me as not recognising the illness as I see it. Mm-hmm. And as, in my opinion, many other scientists and doctors see it. I do tend to carry around pieces of paper. Oh, look at this, and they glance at it, but there you go. In Britain, the difference is, I think there's more recognition now. It's not 100% by any stretch of the imagination, but I think I could find a doctor within the state system, within the public system, who had some belief. But that's where it ends, really. You don't really get any treatment. There isn't any sort of biological treatment or biological investigation. It is more a perception. The perception is better over there in certain situations, though I'm sure I could find doctors who would say, no, if you went for a long walk every day, things would improve. It is your choice that you were ill. So I'm sure I could find that. I don't think it's perfect.
Mm.
But politicians seem a little bit more active in the UK surrounding it. But I mean, there is a case, you know, which has been publicised quite a lot within the ME community. A young woman called Gigi, who was kept in hospital for a year and told that she had a psychiatric illness and not supported. So, and that was only last year. So I think there's more support. It's not 100%, and there is no treatments offered.
Mm.
But here you struggle to find a doctor who is willing to accept your symptoms and willing to help. And that is partly because of fear, I think, as well.
Mm.
They're fearful that they're going to have some sort of complaint made against them, that they're treating me not psychiatrically and then therefore, in their opinion, not helping me recover.
Okay, I think this was already quite comprehensive. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. Was there anything else you want to add, or anything?
No. I think it's just so important that as many people as possible speak about this illness and how they perceive it and how it affects them, because society really is not listening yet, and the more we talk, the better, hopefully.
Right.
They will listen.
All right, then thank you so much for talking to me, and let's hope that things improve in Finland as well in the near future. Sooner than better. Right.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.